The Kansas City Chiefs have a hole. The Cleveland Browns have already tried to move their wide receiver once. Could it be a match? We'll break that down and more on your latest Locked On Browns, which starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things dog pound, LGB and ELOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd, and we appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day, certainly during times like this. Become an everydayer, join the everyday crowd, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Do not miss any of the action. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. We'll talk a little bit about Kansas City Chiefs and their need for a new number one wide receiver. Segment 2 started all off first with your Cleveland Browns news of the day. We're not going to put these in level of importance because, one, we're going to extrapolate a little bit on. First things first, cornerback MJ Emerson was cleared from the concussion protocol. Should be good to go for practice this week, the game this week. Ethan Posick, God bless him, putting out the effort yesterday. Day-to-day, and as we all know, Ethan not returning to the game led to the ridiculous penalty called on Nick Harris. I thought Myles Garrett's quote on that was just absolutely epic. You know me. You all know me. I love my money. I've certainly been held a lot worse than that and not had it called. You get it. Jordan Hicks, obviously been battling the last couple of weeks, getting a little beat up. He is day-to-day, which means, probably we're going to go with the same thing Jordan Hicks been going through here the last couple of weeks where maybe there's not a lot of practicing, but we'll do everything he can to cut it out, cut it in for game time. David Njoku is expected to be back at practice this week. Granted, we heard that last week. He didn't practice Wednesday. He came out Thursday, did some things, didn't practice Friday. Obviously did not play against the Las Vegas Raiders. Hopefully that'll be trending towards David. Brown certainly can use every single playmaker available to them. So getting David Njoku back would be vital. Naheem Hines is expected to practice soon. It could be as early this week. So we'll see where we're at as the Browns hopefully try to bolster, get more production everywhere, certainly get some more production into that running back room. And I think the one that everybody's been highly anticipating, highly waiting for. Come Wednesday, the bat signal looks like it will be lit. Nick Chubb will return to practice for the Cleveland Browns Wednesday, which will open up a 21-day window to be brought back from his injury designation. And if you saw yesterday, and look, when teams are 1-3, man, it gets tough. And, you're not going to see a whole lot of peace and harmony when teams in the NFL, certainly teams in the NFL with aspirations. You're not going to see a lot of peace and harmony when teams are struggling. And somebody who, is not necessarily vocal or is, boisterous, very, very, active with speaking to media, but one guy that can certainly keep cooler heads to prevail is certainly Nick Chubb. For the Browns to be able to get Nick Chubb back, and, we'll be honest, I'm not sure that, this Sunday in Washington is realistic. It probably still for me boils down to, week 7 at home against the Cincinnati Bengals, which ironically enough, he owns. So probably not even week 6 in Philly, although I would love to see it. But it's good to hear that Nick Chubb will be, returning to some work here. I think this team needs his influence, him around them more. Nick is, one of the best things the Cleveland Browns organization has going for itself right now. So hopefully for the possibility to get Nick Chubb back certainly creates, it fills the void. There's no question about that. I think I've seen enough of Dante Foreman, Jerome Ford, look, we say it all the time, the running game, of course, the offensive line, it's all got to work in unison. It's not right now. Jerome Ford is, busting off a couple of big runs here and there to, get his yards per carry to a decent number. But, when you get dig deeper into it, one carry here and there, or one carry per week doesn't necessarily tell the whole tale. as we've seen. And, the running game has certainly been something that is, certainly not been up to the Cleveland Browns standard over the last 4 years. But, what would be your expectations when Nick does come back? You got to think, early it's maybe 5 to 10 touches. You probably think he comes back on a pitch count, especially with the situation the Browns are in. You can't just bring Nick Chubb in here and just say, oh, well, we're going to run the ball with Nick Chubb 25 times a game, and hopefully that'll be enough to make the difference and overcome all our shortcomings. It's foolish. It's reckless. But you want him to come in and hopefully be a part of, and be something that can, help this team, whether it's a couple of carries a quarter, could be something that, helps this team with something they certainly don't have, a player as dynamic as Nick, a player as polished as Nick, just a player as professional and overall good as Nick Chubb is. It's something that this offense sorely needs. They really can't rely on the running game like they have in years in the past. And, certainly a lot of that has to do as well with the offensive line. Again, everybody's got their equal part in all of this. But just getting him in there. And look, I think for Cleveland Browns fans, it's going to make everybody just feel a little bit generally better. Look, everybody rode that high in 2023. But, man, that week 2, 2023 Monday night game against Pittsburgh Steelers when Nick went down, I mean, it just, there was a sunken feeling in everyone's hearts, stomachs as you lose, just an absolute baller of the Cleveland Browns history. Nick Chubb will, receive every accolade, a Cleveland Brown can get, when his playing days are over. He will be somebody that, will be, remembered, and he will be somebody they will always bring back, probably certainly a possibility that number 24 could be retired one day. That's the kind of player this man has been for this franchise. Just getting him back, getting his presence back is huge for this team. There's no question about it. Ideally, I think you're looking at this is to try to get Nick through the rest of the season healthy, whatever the 2024 tale tells for the Browns. And, the Browns are basically going to get a nice little audition here of what Nick Chubb looks like for the rest of 2024. And then the two sides are going to sit down and see if they're going to want to continue the relationship into 2025, what that would, financially and, monetarily feasibly be to suit the camp of Nick Chubb, to suit the Cleveland Browns' needs. Again, this team will not be strapped for money. So anybody who's reading that and thinks they're going to have financial issues, you guys are following the wrong content. You guys are reading the wrong content. So, it could be I guess the earliest, it would be 13. It could be 12. It could be 11. And the Browns will get that, 13, 12, 11 game audition to see where Nick is at, coming off the second serious knee injury that this young man has had in his career. And then the two parties will get to work on whether or not, the relationship continues into 2025, which I think the Browns would want. I think Nick Chubb wants. We know every Browns fan wants. But more importantly, Nick Chubb will be back at practice on Wednesday. Speaking of teams needing an offensive burst, Kansas City Chiefs suffered a massive blow yesterday. Could the Browns have just the thing that is the Kansas City hole created by the injury of Rashee Rice? We'll continue. Your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first bet of $5. And again, check it all out over at FanDuel.com. Hey everybody, Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Locked On Browns. Of course, we always appreciate all of you who take the time and the effort to make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. Always appreciate you. If you were not a member of the everyday crowd by now, well, make a new plan. Stand, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Change that, better your life. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. Now, if anybody saw yesterday, certainly the game is being played concurrently with the Browns at Las Vegas Raiders. Kareem Hunt played for the Chiefs. Rashee Rice, early in the game, goes down. Certainly appears, for all intents and purposes, that is an ACL injury for Rashee Rice. Devastating blow for the Kansas City offense. Big part of what they do. Probably their number one and truest wide receiver. So, a lot of things are done within the scheme and the scope of their offense, with their wide receivers, whether it is a player like Juju Smith-Schuster or a McCole Hardman. They're starting to open things up a little bit more and get a little bit more out of Xavier Worthy, but Xavier Worthy is certainly not in any way, shape, or form going to be a number one wide receiver for a Super Bowl contending team. The other kid, Watson, all good players. Yes, all good players, but not on the path that Rashee Rice is. No other Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver to this point in the season has double-digit receptions, where Rashee Rice is a guy who was capable of getting double-digit receptions himself in one game alone. Now, it does bring up the question. And his play over the last 2 weeks has certainly gotten better. If you take back if you give him the touchdown yesterday on the bogus holding call, it was 3 touchdowns in 2 weeks for Amari Cooper. But the Cleveland Browns already tried to move Amari Cooper once. They had a trade that was agreed upon in principle with the San Francisco 49ers for Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, it takes two to tango. There is no question whatsoever about that. And financially, would have been something that Ayuk probably would have accepted. It didn't seem like Ayuk would want to be somebody that would come to Cleveland. So that brings you up the point of, would the Browns possibly consider one more opportunity at maybe moving Amari Cooper? And moving Amari Cooper to the Kansas City Chiefs, it satisfies the issues that the Kansas City Chiefs have as far as their top receiver. The Browns, it's a clogged room at wide receiver right now. And if you've heard me talk over the last couple of weeks, some of the problem I think they're having issues with is, and it's not like they're too good, obviously, because 1-3, they're not throwing for 200 yards a game. It's certainly, you can't use the word too good, or they're too deep. But because Amari Cooper, in the last year of his deal, he's got nothing on paper for 2025. So there's probably got to be an extremely good possibility that maybe Amari Cooper moves on after this season. So if you were the Browns, do you call up Kansas City and say, look, we've got to evaluate a lot of young receivers, certainly Jerry Jeudy, who the Cleveland Browns have given a lot of money to and already guaranteed money further into the future. So certainly they want to start seeing more of Jerry Jeudy and maybe transcending towards, is Jerry Jeudy our number one wide receiver of the future? Or is Jerry Jeudy a 1B receiver? Or is Jerry Jeudy a number 2 receiver? And they can start to evaluate where they feel Jerry Jeudy is long-term and then build their wide receiver room after that. Cedric Tillman, it's really difficult to get him snaps right now. I think the Browns are calling for things for Cedric Tillman that maybe are not within the best of his ability. He's a big wide receiver. He runs well. He is a guy that needs to be running longer vertical routes. They're just not getting the opportunity to do that. Elijah Moore, and I guess everybody appreciates Elijah Moore's dad chiming in, but look, he didn't go to the level of Odell Beckham Jr.'s father yesterday. And I can tell you probably what most of the thing is from the Elijah Moore camp is. The Elijah Moore camp's issue is that Elijah Moore is a pending free agent at the end of the year as well. Every time they talk about Amari Cooper and they mention it, they don't mention about Elijah Moore. And Elijah Moore did catch over 50 passes last year, was a pretty integral part of the Browns' success last year. And he's kind of phased out right now because Amari just gets so many targets, and you're still trying to create targets for Jerry Jeudy. You're going to have to find a boatload of targets, possibly this week and going further, for tight end David Njoku. So there's a lot going on there. Not to mention, you haven't been able to get Jamari Thrash on the field yet. You'd like to see what the rookie's got. Looking at what Jamari Thrash did over the summer, looking at what Jamari Thrash did over his collegiate career, there's not really a reason that Jamari Thrash has got to sit around and wait. Jamari Thrash should be ready to contribute in some way whatsoever right now. Not to mention, also on your practice squad, a guy that I have talked a ton about. You have a former first-round pick, a former guy who has won two Super Bowl rings with the Kansas City Chiefs, Kadarius Toney. All the talent in the world. I'd like to get him on the field a little bit, see if there's something there, see if he's able to contribute. So how would it maybe work? Well, for the Browns, I'm looking at what Kansas City has. Kansas City Chiefs have a first-round pick next year. That's not going to get it done. Kansas City Chiefs have a second-round pick next year. Don't think that's going to get done. Kansas City Chiefs have 2 picks in the third round. next year. They have their own third round pick, which you figure is going to be a very, very high selection, as this team plays late into January every year, mostly plays in the Super Bowl. So that maybe gives you belief that that pick would probably be one of the last picks of the third round, usually pick number 96. However, the Kansas City Chiefs also hold the Tennessee Titans second round pick. Cornerback LeJerry Sneed is now a member of the Tennessee Titans. So I'm the Browns. I'm thinking he's probably worth a little bit better than a top 100 pick, meaning, ideally I'd want to be somewhere in the 70s or 80s. The Chiefs could say it could be pick 96. They could say it could be the Titans pick. It could say we'll work out some deal where you'll get the better of the pick. Most likely it'll be the Titans pick, not the Chiefs pick. You can get the better of the pick if Amari Cooper meets this incentive, and we win another Super Bowl. I think there's people thinking that, Amari Cooper, I had some people scoff, day 3, 5, fifth. Look, just because Dallas gave him up, they don't want to pay his money for a fifth round pick doesn't mean Amari Cooper's not worth more than a fifth round pick. Just because that's what Jerry Jones agreed to, because he didn't want to pay the contract to Amari Cooper anymore, doesn't mean that is all Amari Cooper was worth. This is not a salary dump for the Cleveland Browns. I believe what's really technically left financially to pay Amari Cooper this season is around $900,000. Obviously, that dwindles down more and more the closer you get to the trading deadline. If you do trade him at the trading deadline, it's about $600,000 that the team acquiring Amari Cooper would be on the hook for. For me, this just feels like something that could maybe work for both teams. What would be the holdup for the Browns? Is this automatically saying that your season is over? I don't think so, but I think a lot of people would interpret this if you were to trade Amari Cooper, say this week, say next week. I think a lot of people would think that the Cleveland Browns were waving the flag of surrender and saying that their season is over in 2024. I just stated you a bunch of reasons why I think the Cleveland Browns could do this move, because they have to evaluate a lot of in-house talent. So therefore, when you have a guy like Amari Cooper who is going to warrant double-digit targets week in, week out, and then you figure between David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy, you're probably going to want to get another 16 targets, maybe to both those guys. You're talking there's 26 targets per week. It's not going to give you a chance to properly evaluate Cedric Tillman. You'd like to get Elijah Moore a little bit more involved. It's certainly going to destroy any chance Elijah Moore's got at a decent deal in free agency. Not that he's in line for big money, but wide receivers make more than we believe. And, Elijah Moore did have a really solid season last year, I think, for this team. You would certainly like to get Prochet on the field a little bit more. not Prochet, Jamari Thrash. And again, I would like to open up an opportunity to get Kadarius Toney on the field more. I just wanted to give it a shot. I would like to get Kadarius Toney on the field. Does he still got it? Is he not a knucklehead anymore? Which is probably a bigger question, whether or not he still has talent. But he was a first rounder, explosive athlete. Had one of his first games for the New York Giants, I think it was 10 receptions for 189 yards against Dallas Cowboys. Granted, he got thrown out of that game for throwing 2 punches. Holds the longest punt return in Super Bowl history. Does have 2 Super Bowl rings. It could be something that works out well for the Kansas City Chiefs, and it could be something that the Cleveland Browns, if the offer is just too good, would be foolish not to take. Browns already have 9 draft choices. Going to need a lot of talent. He's going to get younger in the offseason. So there could be something to it. Kansas City Chiefs, maybe interested in Amari Cooper. Browns send Amari Cooper. Third round pick. Could be a pick somewhere maybe, late 60s, somewhere in the 90s. But something could be worked out there between both teams. And I think Amari Cooper would probably fit in with Kansas City and would be an absolutely perfect addition for them after the difficult loss yesterday, Rashee Rice. We're going to continue here on your latest Locked On Browns. Your host, Jeff Lloyd. And as always, we appreciate you all for hanging out. We may be transitioning from spring and summers to certainly fall and winter. But that doesn't mean your enthusiasm for a good night out. Going to see one of your favorite comedians, going to see one of your favorite sports teams play, or certainly going to see one of your favorite bands or musicians play. You need to use the proper apps. Game Time is that app. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have an all-in pricing toggling option. This feature shows you the total up front, so you don't go from window to window, and all of a sudden, each ticket price is starting to rise more and more. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so to make sure you're getting exactly what you think you are. The lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with Game Time with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Go to Game Time right now and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Closing out your latest Lockdown Browns, your host Jeff Floyd. Obviously, a little tough time here. Browns 1-3. Difficult loss yesterday, 2016 in Las Vegas, a game that should have never even been that close. Nick Chubb going to return to practice on Wednesday. Hopefully, maybe this, gets everybody a little excited, a little bit more juiced up about this team. Certainly, we've talked about the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs now have a big-time need for a top wide receiver, and the Cleveland Browns may just have the ability to scratch that itch for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I would have my eyes on one of the two third-round picks the Kansas City Chiefs currently possess for the 2025 NFL Draft. Little on the tackling. This is, I can't even anymore. I just can't. This defense was so fantastic last year. And look, a lot of it last year was gang and tackling. Like guys were just blown up in the backfield or guys were blown up on the sidelines and the Browns were running 2-3 deep. So I think a lot of this missed tackling is also running hand in hand with getting hats to the ball. It's been an issue and it can't be an issue anymore. 2 weeks in a row, the Cleveland Browns have had double-digit missed tackles. Inexcusable for this team. There's just too much talent on it. And they certainly paid too much money to this defense to have these issues. Cannot go on. Needs to improve. Devin Bush yesterday actually put together a nice day. I think Devin Bush was the second highest graded player by Pro PFF yesterday for the Cleveland Browns. So good for him. JOK was right neck and neck with him. So I'm not saying that like JOK had a bad day or anything. Hicks has been a good tackler for this team. The defensive backs, Martin Emerson's got to be better. Denzel Wardson, everybody's got to be better. Everybody has to tackle better. And it's always going to be more cognizant on your secondary that they make their tackles. Otherwise, you're turning now 6-yard plays, 7-yard plays into 20-yard plays, 30-yard plays, 40-yard plays, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This team needs to improve in a lot of ways, in a lot of facets. So that is something that's going to have to get better. It's not crazy to get it better, but it's not something that's taught a lot in the NFL. It's certainly something that's not practiced a lot. Nobody's going to, have these guys, going after each other in practice, taking each other down. It's just way too dangerous of a business. But it's inexcusable to have the amount of missed tackles this team does. And certainly when you're going to play a team this week with a quarterback that runs like Jaden Daniels runs, they have good running back in Brian Robinson. You guys all know, I don't have to tell any of you people about Terry McLaurin. You all can sit down and tell me about Terry McLaurin, about the open field abilities of this guy. So it's a little disappointing when a team with all that talent. And look, a lot of it gets in your head, and a lot of it comes down to when either A, you're trying way too hard to make a huge play, which is a 27-yard loss that also results in a turnover and a touchdown, and you guys get the ball back on the kickoff. There's so much guys try to do so much in tight games, and lose the simple aspect of exactly what their job is to do: find guy, get guy, put guy on ground. Simple enough in theory, but when you got a million other things going in your head and you're peeking at the scoreboard, you're peeking at the clock, your team is down, but your offense is struggling a little bit, and what can we do on defense? There really needs to be a woo-saw moment for the Cleveland Browns. They just woo. But the problem was that was supposed to be the last 2 weeks against the New York Giants and the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, where the competition's picking up with the Washington Commanders, which I told you wanted them early, Washington's gotten a lot better quickly. than anybody anticipated. I was hoping that this Commanders team was going to start to look like this in the second half of the season when they were way past the Browns. Eagles are a hot mess. Nick Sirianni is probably a guy who's, has one of the hottest seats in the NFL as far as, eventually being moved on from. Certainly the other one would certainly be Doug Peterson down in Jacksonville. Bill Belichick might want to just start, picking his office down there in Jacksonville because, seems to be the most logical fit. Bill moves south like all the golden oldies do and kind of gets to take over a Jacksonville team where the ownership will let him take over the Jacksonville team. But the tackling and so many other aspects of this Cleveland Browns team have to get better. Offensive line play, the running game, hopefully Nick Chubb sooner than later will provide that spark. The passing game, David Njoku, hopefully sooner than later will provide that spark. The defense, there's not a level on this defense, whether it's the defensive line, the linebackers, the secondary, that can hang their heads and say, you know what, we're good, we're fine. There's no improvement we can have. There's not a level, there's not a unit on this Cleveland Browns team that is incapable of improving at this point. Everybody, and it is a collective effort of being below the threshold. It's fair to say. This team just absolutely needs to get better. We brought up some options. Certainly Nick Chubb coming back to practice. Trading Amari Cooper, I'm not saying it's going to make this team better, but it gives this team to evaluate some people now and acquire some more draft assets. And everybody to the man on defense. Tackling needs to improve, and it needs to improve quickly. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd is a bunch of filthy animals, and they're my filthy animals. I suggest you become a filthy animal. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Do not miss any of the action. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.